Log on, tune in, find out. Another good idea from Cambridge.
We'll continue its lectures on casuistic theory with unequal parameters.
Thank you. Well, so during the first two lectures, I have introduced the Kazhdan-Lusztig basis and the so-called left, right, and two-sided cells of Weyl groups in the general setting of unequal parameters. And during the last lecture, I have given many properties, many facts about the partition of the Coxeter group into left cells. So these were facts. Today, I will mainly talk about problems and conjectures. There will be almost no result today, just only a bunch of problems. And so the first kind of problem is still related to the partition into left or right or two-sided cells. As I have said yesterday, the results which we have obtained, for instance, the upper bound given by Mayanov-Gex theorem or the lower bound given by Lustig's result on coset representatives, they are not sufficient for obtaining the partition into Kazhdan-Lustig cells. But there are cases in which we are able to compute these Kazhdan-Lustig cells. It's in general quite a difficult problem. In the equal parameter case, there are many cases where it is known. So the type A, the classical groups, I think affine type A, I'm not sure about, but I think that affine type A, she, as on the affine type A tilde. And also, well, you can compute for F4, for E6, E7. I don't know if E8 is completed, but might be. And in the unequal parameter case, the situation is much less advanced. There is a case which is called the quasi-split case. I don't want to explain what it is, but it's a kind of algebra that comes from the endomorphism algebra of a finite reductive group given by the induced from the Borel subgroup to the group in the case where the finite reductive group is not split. There is also one case in type Bn. So I recall that for the finite Weyl groups, the only case where you can have unequal parameters is the cases where you have two distinct conjugacy classes of reflections, and in the case of type B, you can put two different parameters, one on the parameter T and the other on the other generators, S1, S2 up to Sn minus 1. And when this parameter is much bigger than the other one, then we were able to compute the partition into left and also into two-sided cells a little bit later. And also the case of the type F4 was done by Mayanov-Gex. Well, you could say, well, you just use your computer and you get your type F4. This is a finite group, but you see that you have infinitely many choices of parameters. And first, you have to reduce this to a finite computation. So there is work even for doing the case of type F4. And recently, Jérémy Guillot has completed the classification of left, right, and two-sided cells of affine type G2 and affine type B2. And this is for all the parameters, all choices of parameters. So this is G2 tilde. So in this case, you have two conjugacy classes of reflections. This guy is alone, and the two others. So you have the possibility to put two parameters. But in B2 tilde, the situation is much more complicated because none of these three reflections is conjugate to another. So you have three possible parameters, and this makes the things much more complicated. Well, also you can compute it by hand on up to B6, for instance. It's possible to not by hand but by computer. that's possible to get some other cases. There are also some other cases for special choices of parameters in the fine-value group, I think. Well, and so from all these results of all these mathematicians, you can see that some regularity can occur in the partition into cells. And the first question that you can ask is about the left connectedness of cells. So what is the left connected subset in a Weil group? The subset is in a left connected subset of a Weil group, of a Cox-theta group, is a subset E, such that you can connect any pair of element x, y in this subset by multiplying on the left by simple reflections and by staying inside this subset. Okay? So you can go from x to y by multiplying successively by S1, S2, up to SR, but without going out of the set E. And the conjecture, and Lustig conjecture that every left cell is left connected. And moreover, in fact, the left cells should be the left connected components in the two-sided cells. So this can be, in all the cases where the cells have been computed, this is true.
So once we know, well, we know two-sided cells, so we can.
If you know this conjecture and if you know two-sided cells, in some sense, you have the left cells. Yes. That's right.
That side you mean for all x, y, and e?
Oh yes, sorry. For all x, y, e, of course. Okay. Well, this is the first kind of property of cells that we are far from being which is far from being understood. And the second kind of property is what can we be called the semi-continuity properties. It's a way of stating how the partition into cells should vary as the parameter varies. And for this, I will assume that my ordered group is R, so that I have only real parameters. I don't want to take some strange, some other order group. So, and I consider the vector space V of functions which are going from S up to conjugacy. So this is the function we have allowed to for defining the ecoalgebras, and we denote by V sharp the subset of maps with value with non-negative value.
So what is the operation then? How does it translate this to maps?
What?
I mean, vector space, so what is the operation?
Oh, sorry. Here this is R. Sorry. Here this is R, and here this is R non-negative. Yes. Okay. Well, and the conjecture says that there should exist a finite set of linear rational hyperplanes satisfying the following property. First of all, well, once you have a finite set of hyperplanes, you can define facets associated to this hyperplane arrangement, and you have a partition of the whole space V into facets. In particular, you get a partition of V sharp into facets, and the conjecture says that if phi and phi prime are two functions in the same A facet, then the partition into left, right, or two-sided cells should coincide. And moreover, if you are, so there are open facets called the chambers, but if you are on a closed facet, then there is a property which is quite strange and that I don't understand really, but which seems to be too old. That if you take any element, any phi, in this any parameter function, then you can get the partition into left cells only by knowing what is the partition of left cells for all the open facets, for the chambers that contains this function phi in their closure. So let me explain a little bit more in the case, what happens in the case of type G2. So here we have two parameters. We are working with functions with the parameters a and b. And what happens is that you have, in this case, we have only two parameters, so we have lines, which is b equals a, b equals 3/2 a, and b equals 2a, so that's not the right, no, 2/3 a and a over 2. And if you take two functions in this chamber here, then you get exactly the same partition. If you take a function which is on the boundary, a parameter function which is on the boundary, satisfying exactly b equals a over 2, then you can obtain the partition of a left cell for this particular function is a minimal subset, which is a union of left cell for this for a function for a parameter function in this chamber, and a union of left cell for a parameter function in this left cell. So this is, it tells you that it is the smallest, it is the finest partition, which is less fine than the two partitions which are on one side, on one side and on the other side. Well, and I want to illustrate this in the case of type G2 tilde. So as I said, that there are two parameters b and a, and this is the partition of G2 tilde into into cells. So let me explain what does it mean. An affine Weyl group can be as a set. The affine Weyl group can be identified with a set of alcoves. The fundamental alcove here, the black one, corresponds to the identity element, and since the Weyl group acts transitively and freely on the alcoves, any alcove corresponds to a unique element of the Coxeter of the Weyl group of type affine Weyl group of type G2 tilde. Well, and so here this is the partition into two-sided and left cells in for the case of parameter b is greater than 2a. By the partition, I mean that two alcoves which have the same color are in the same two-sided cell. So the blue, strips gives you only one two-sided cell. And on this picture, being left connected in the algebraic sense is really being connected as you on the picture. Okay. So the left cells are the connected component, or are the left connected component of the two-sided cell. So the blue, for instance, the blue two-sided cell has 6 left cells inside. Okay. Well, so as I've said, so that's b greater than 2a. So maybe my picture is not correct. We have to reverse a and b. And so for b equals 2a, a left cell for b equal to a must be a union of left cell for b greater than 2a. And that you can see that this is true. For b equal to a, then this green one goes with the other. That's all what happens. That's not a lot. Then you go back to an open chamber. So all these cells must split into left cells for the parameters being in between 2a and 3a over 2. And you can see that really the left cell for the parameter 2a are really the minimal subsets, which are union of left cell for the one side and for left cell for the other side. Okay, so this is the smallest refinement. And you can go further. So for b equals 3a over 2, then all the blue goes together. Then this splits again, but only one element is put out a cell. Then the equal parameter case, for those who know Lustig's paper on the affine Weyl group, you recognize the picture at the end of his paper. And when for the last possible set of parameters, then you have this partition into left cells. Well, all these results were obtained by Jérémy Guillot, and also I must thank him warmly for providing me these pictures. He did it. I didn't do it. He did all these pictures for me. And so this, and you can, if you also work with B2 tilde, you can also see that the semi-continuity properties, that the left connectedness property hold also in this case. So this is quite good evidences for these conjectures. And finally, I recall a conjecture that I have stated at the end of the last lecture, namely that every left cell contains at least one involution. I have put bracket because I consider one as an involution. I don't know if it's correct, but well, one is an involution for me. And this is true for finite Coxetel groups. In the equal parameter case, Lustig has provided a proof. And for the other case, F4 and Bn, this was done by Meinhof, Lacry, and me. But you can see that even for such a statement, the equal parameter case by Lustig was done in a nice way. By this I mean that he didn't use a classification. His proof involves only the geometry of Schubert varieties, and there is no classification for obtaining such a result. But in the unequal parameter case, we did it almost by hand, group by group, and it's quite nasty. And so that's what I want to talk about now. So in the equal parameter case, you have a geometric interpretation of Kazhdan-Lustig theory that really helps to compute cells, that really helps to understand properties of the Kazhdan-Lustig theory. And this theory is missing in the unequal parameter case, but Lustig has given an attempt to generalize what can be done in the equal parameter case for the unequal parameter case. And the main ingredient for trying to generalize what can be done in the equal parameter case is the so-called Lustig's A function. And it is defined as follows. So recall that we have a Kazhdan-Lustig basis. The elements, to be comfortable, from now on we assume that W is finite or a finite or a fine Weil group. So recall that we have a Kazhdan-Lustig basis, Cx, which satisfies two properties that I don't recall. And you can consider the constant structure into this for this basis. So you multiply two elements, Cx and Cy, and you see how it can be expressed in terms of the Kazhdan-Lustig basis. So you get elements H, X, Y, Z inside our base ring R. And these elements must be, of course, invariant under the involution, because if you multiply two invariant elements, you should get some invariant element. But also, on the ring R, you have a notion of degree. Well, if gamma is equal to Z, the ring R is the ring of Laurent polynomials, so you understand easily what is the degree. And if, in fact, here we have exactly the same definition. The degree of the sum of A gamma gamma, exponential of gamma. This is the maximum of the gamma, such that A gamma is different from 0. And the valuation can be defined, of course, in the same way. And it takes value in gamma union minus infinity for the degree, but well, that's, well, for me, 0 has not all the possible degrees. I'm sorry, only minus infinity. Well, and while using these structure constants, you can define the A function, A of Z, being the maximum of the degree of all these structure constants, H, X, Y, Z. Well, in a finite Weil group, that's clearly well defined. In an affine Weil group, since you have infinitely many X and Y, then it could be not bounded, but in fact Lustig proved that the A function is bounded by the maximum of the maximum of the phi of Wi, where little wi is the longest element of capital Wi, and I runs over the subset of S such that Wi is finite. Well, so this tells you that A of Z is well defined and it's bounded by this element. And once you have this A function A of Z, well, so A of Z is the maximum of the degree of the h x y z. So you can write h x y z to be a coefficient lying in Z times the exponential of A of Z plus something involving only monomials, which are strictly less than A of Z. The coefficient here can be 0. That's not a problem. It's in general an integer. And we also introduce two other invariants, namely delta of Z, which is it's the opposite of the degree of P1 star of Z. I recall that Cy is the sum for x in W of Px y star Tx. So the Px y star are the expression of as a coefficient of the Cauchy-Nanostic basis in the standard basis, and you consider the coefficient of T1 if it corresponds to the trace on the ecoalgebra, taking the trace in the ecoalgebra, the canonical trace. And well, so you will express this particular element. You take the opposite of its degree, it must be negative, and you call NZ the leading coefficient. An easy property is that the A function takes only non-negative value, because if you multiply C1 by CZ, you get CZ, so it tells you that the degree of H1ZZ is equal to 0. That's all. Okay. Well, a little bit less complicated, but not so, is that if you take a non-trivial element, then the function A is really strictly bigger than 0. And the reason is that if you take an element which is non-trivial, then there is a simple reflection S, such that SZ is less than Z. And if you multiply CS by CZ, you obtain the exponential of phi of S plus the exponential of minus phi of S times CZ. So you obtain a degree which is strictly positive. And finally, we denote by D the subset of elements in W, such that these two invariants, the Lustig A function and the opposite of the degree of the, let's say, the trace of the Cauchy-Nanostic element, are equal. So this defines a subset of W. And once you have defined all of this, Lustig proposed a big bunch of conjectures that are here, namely 15 conjectures that I don't want to give many details about them, but what can it say? For instance, one very important conjecture is the fourth one. It tells you that the A function is non-decreasing with respect to the left-right order. And in particular, the A function must be constant on the two-sided cell. So it's the A function which is defined only by taking this maximum of the degree, has a very nice behavior with respect to the partition into two-sided cell. Another property tells you that all the elements inside my set D here are involutions. And the last, for instance, P13 tells you that every let cell contains a unique element of D. In particular, you get that every let cell should contain an involution. These distinguished involutions are often called Duflo involutions, at least in the equal parameter case, but we can we can keep this name Duflo involutions for the general case. Well, there are also very important properties that for instance, one of the hardest properties in this set of conjectures, namely P9, P10, and P11. Let's talk about P9. So the property P4 tells you that the A function is non-decreasing with respect to the left-right or left-right preorder. But P9 tells you much more. It tells you that if two elements are related by the Cauchy-Naustic preorder and have the same A function, then they are in the same cell. That's really that means that if you are able to compute the A function and to prove such conjectures, that's not the case, but if you are able, then it gives a big help for computing the Cauchy-Naustic cells. Okay. Well, so what about these conjectures? But in fact, these conjectures in the equal parameter case are true, proved by Lustig, and these conjectures are all consequences of the fact that the Cauchy-Naustic elements here, Px, y star, have non-negative coefficients, and that also the multiplication, all the coefficients of h, x, y, and z have non-negative coefficients. Once you admit these two properties, which really comes from deep facts about the geometry of Schubert cells, then it's a purely algebraic work to prove all these conjectures. It's not. Don't want to say that it is easy. It can be tricky, might be smart, but it's never. It's not really deep. The deep part is really to have these non-negative properties of the coefficients. And there is also some other cases in which these these conjectures are proved, namely the quasi-split case. I recall that the quasi-split case, this is the case of a eco-algebra coming from the endomorphism algebra of a non-split finite reductive group acting on its, well, let's say, on its flag variety. And there is also one other case in which it is known. So it's theorem. That the Lustig's conjectures are true if W is of type Bn, so in this case, and if B is large enough, as before, B must be strictly greater than n-1 times A. Well, so this theorem was proved by Meinhof, Lacry, and myself. The conclusion was given by Meinhof and Lacry. This proof involves maybe 4 or 5 papers written by subsets of these people. And in some sense, this proof goes in the bad way, in the bad direction. What would be interesting is to prove first the Lustig conjectures, and then using this to for instance, to compute the cells to do representation theory. The way we proceed for proving this theorem was opposite. We computed by brute force the left cells, the two-sided cells, try to get more and more properties about these partitions, and then using an extra idea coming from Meinhof's work, namely the orthogonal representations of ecoalgebras, then it was possible to prove the conjecture. So in some sense, we have used the partition into cells, we have used something about the representation theory to get the conjecture. But the conjectures are done to help you to make the representation theory to find the cells. So, well, but at least that's some good evidence. It's not an easy fact. It's a good evidence for Lustig's conjectures. Well, So why should we be interested in Lustig's conjectures? As I have said, in the equal parameter case, they are consequences of the geometric interpretation. And in the unequal parameter case, instead with starting with the geometric interpretation, we can start with this conjecture to try to build all what Lustig has built in the equal parameter case. For instance, the asymptotic algebra, which is really a very fundamental object in this theory. We can, and then try to relate the representation theory of this asymptotic algebra to the representation theory of the ecoalgebra. Well, so that's what I want to talk about now. I want to talk about the so-called asymptotic algebra. And the asymptotic algebra is defined very easily using the leading coefficient of the polynomial h, x, y, and z. So the asymptotic algebra is defined as follows. You consider a 3Z module where the basis elements are indexed by the Coxeter group. So when they are denoted by TW. And you define a product, Tx, Ty, by forgetting about all the polynomial h, x, y, and z. You just keep the leading coefficient. Just this formula. This gives you a product, but it's of course not clear that it is this defines an algebra, but it does. So this is a theorem that was proved by Lustig. So if all the conjectures hold, P1, P2 up to P15 hold. So first of all, the number of left cells is finite. So recall that we are in a finite or in a fine Weyl group. There exist Coxeter groups, infinite Coxeter groups, in which the number of left cells is infinite. So, but in this case, the number of left cells is finite, and since there should be only one element in each left cell, it means that this set D of Duflo involutions is finite. And the product that we have defined here is associative. And it's also a unitary associative algebra, but the unit is not so easy to, it's not T1. The unit is the sum of the ND TD. The sum over the elements in the set of Duflo involutions, and by chance this set is finite. I mean, so this is a real sum. And moreover, not only the unit element is this, but these elements T and this index D for D Duflo involutions are almost idempotent, or in other words, ND times TD is an idempotent. So this decomposition gives you a decomposition of the asymptotic algebra into a sum of orthogonal idempotents in this ring. So where does this associativity property come from? Well, mainly for all these conjectures, but one that you maybe can't see very well, but a property here which tells you relation between products of the structure constants in the Kazhdan-Lustig basis. This is mainly what you need for proving this. Well, you also need some properties. The fact that, for instance, the element ND here is plus or minus 1, so that it is invertible in Z. So that you can, it means that you can stay inside Z for working out with this algebra. Well, so once we have this define this asymptotic algebra, we can try to start to understand its representation theory, and it's its representation theory can be, well, to study its representation theory, we will make a lot of use of this idempotence. So let's define for X a subset of W, Jx to be the Z module generated by the elements in the basis which are indexed by X. And we define by Bx the sum for all the Duflo involutions contained in the set X of the NDTD. So this guy is an idempotent in the asymptotic algebra. And so, what do I want to say? Yes. One of the main thing about the asymptotic algebra is that it encodes very well the partition into left, right, and two-sided cells in a very practical way. Namely that if you assume that Lustig's conjectures hold, and if you consider that if you consider a two-sided cell C, then the set this Z module GC for a two-sided cell is in fact generated by the idempotent BC, and BC is central. So it tells you that it is not only a left ideal, it is also a right ideal, since BC is a central idempotent in G, but it is also a sub-algebra with a unit given by BC. Okay? So each time you have a two-sided cell, you can define a sub-algebra with unit element BC, and it turns out that as a ring, and it's canonical, I mean, J is isomorphic to the product of all these rings. Okay, of this ring JC. So you see that in terms of the asymptotic algebra, the partition of W into two-sided cells can be interpreted as the first decomposition of the ring J. Well, in the infinite case, I don't know if this decomposition is minimal, but in the finite case, as we will see tomorrow, in the finite case, this decomposition is really the decomposition of J into blocks over Z, blocks of this algebra over Z. So I think this is a result due to Geck in the unequal parameter case and to Rouquier in the equal parameter case, I think. Okay. Well, so that's the first link between the structure of J and the cells and the two-sided cells. But what about the left cells? So in the case of a left cell, then again we have the same equality. JC is equal to JBC. So it tells you that, well, this left module is generated by an idempotent, and in particular, this is a projective. It is a left ideal, and it is a projective as a J module. So you can, in this case, you can give an interpretation of left cells as a decomposition of the asymptotic algebra into a left module, and into a decomposition into, well, of course, projective left modules. And again, in this case, in the infinite case, I don't know if you cannot refine this decomposition. But in the finite case, the elements BC are primitive idempotent. Again, this is due to Geck and Rouquier. And so it tells you that you can interpret the left cell as a particular set of projective indecomposable modules for this J algebra. G algebra, J. Well, and the last property is that if C is a left cell, then you can build the intersection of C with its inverse. So C inverse is a right cell, I recall. And in fact, this sub-Z module is the algebra BC times J times BC. And as such, it's a ring with unit element given by BC. And it is, as a ring, isomorphic to the endomorphism algebra of this projective module. Well, the opposite of this, but you can go from one to the from this algebra to its opposite by taking inverse. That's not very important. So you get again an interpretation of these intersections in terms of the representation theory of the J algebra. These are endomorphisms of particular projective modules. Well, so now I realize that I have no slides more. And I have 15 minutes to fill. I don't think I will fill all of them, but I want to say what what we will try to do tomorrow. So tomorrow we will relate the structure of the J algebra with the Hecke algebra, so that we can relate the representation theory of this asymptotic algebra with the representation theory of the Hecke algebra. So it will give you new interpretation of the left cells in terms of the representation theory of the Hecke algebra. In the finite case, we will go further because we will give an interpretation of the A function of a cell in terms of the so-called Schur elements of the irreducible characters of the Hecke algebra, defined using the canonical trace form. So this is what we are going to do tomorrow. And finally, if I have time tomorrow, I will try to explain what should happen, or yes, what should happen in type B. Well, what should be the situation in type B. I must also say something about the semi-continuity properties. The semi-continuity property is really something about the partition into left cell. It's in some sense just combinatoric, but when the parameters vary, you have different asymptotic algebra, one for each facet. So you have an asymptotic algebra corresponding to this facet, an asymptotic algebra in the middle, an asymptotic algebra here. I have really no idea of what should be the relation between the asymptotic algebra in the middle and the two other asymptotic algebras. I have given a conjecture about the partition into cells, but this is just combinatoric. At the representation theoretical level, I have really no explanation. What is it possible to relate just the structure of this algebra in terms of the two others? This I really don't understand. Okay, so I will stop here. I'm sorry.
Questions?
Said that the equal parameter case, P1 up to P15, are consequences of positivity things on the Kazanowski polynomials and stuff. What does it look like in the unequal parameter case? Do you get these properties? I think Jeremy did something like that in GT2, but I'm not sure. Along these lines. And in BN, do you have these properties?
In BN, we have, in the unequal parameter case, there is no positivity property. So you are, at the beginning, you are...
What do you mean there is no property? It doesn't mean anything, or it's not true?
It's false. I mean, you have really negative coefficients in the Kajalowstik, in the structure constants, and so on. You have negative coefficients, so you can't start even. Okay. So well, I don't know what Jeremy has done in general, but you know, for the moment we have no other ways than for the moment almost brute force to reach these conjectures. What can I say is that Lustig is searching for a geometric interpretation for some particular choice of parameters, some particular choices of parameters, involving the character shifts on disconnected groups. And if what he claims is that if he is able to get this geometric interpretation and relating the Kajalowstik element with this geometry, then he would be able to prove the Kajalowstik conjecture, all these conjectures, not using positivity property, but using more difficult things. But what can I can add that he has written, well, 400, 500 pages on character sheets on disconnected groups, and we still don't see how it will. He sees, but we don't.
Same for any parameters.
No, for special choices of parameters. The ones that occur in the endomorphism algebras of induced of Hospital representation in finite reductive groups. For instance, for type B, it means that B over A is an integer or half an integer, nothing else.
Can you say something about these integers ND in the that give the idempotence?
So it's equal to plus or minus 1, but it can be equal to minus 1. That happens. That's to say more. Well, do you have a more precise request? Question? I can't say more than this. It can be negative, even if type, I think in type B2 or G2, already you have the negative coefficients in the unequal parameter case.
If there are no more questions.